You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. A big decision today by the NCAA and Supreme Court. Supreme Court unanimous decision rules that the NCAA they cannot limit compensation for student athletes. They ruled the NCAA was violating antitrust laws by capping education-related gifts and benefits student athletes can receive. The justices sided with a group of former college athletes who claimed the NCAA rules were unfair and violated federal laws designed to promote competition. Students can continue to receive educational benefits like computers, lab equipment, and internships from the schools they play, but the ruling does not decide whether they can be paid salaries. This, folks, is a huge, huge decision that folks have been warning for years. At the NCAA, its executives who are making millions of dollars, football coaches making $5, $6, $7, $10 million, endorsement deals, you name it. Everybody's making money except the athletes. Joining me right now is Taylor Branch, who wrote an ebook called The Cartel, dealing with the NCAA. We had him on my TV One show, Washington Watch, years ago when it came out. And Taylor, anybody who read your book, that ebook, anybody who follows this, look, this was coming, where the NCAA was going to get their comeuppance in terms of how they have treated student athletes for decades.
Absolutely. This is a great step forward. Lots of people have been working on this for a long time. I did a history of it for the Atlantic magazine, as you refer, called The Shame of College Sports. And it was a big exploration for me to figure out how they did it. But remarkably, they had the whole country brainwashed to think that athletes should play for nothing, for the convenience of everybody else that was making money and for the viewers watching. And the court has finally said today that rights come before anybody else's convenience and profits. And if you're going to compete, you've got to allow the athletes who provide the essential talent to have a share of the rewards.
This was the ebook right here. And first of all, I clicked the link, Taylor, and it said it wasn't available at Amazon. So let me know what's going on.
I can tell you, the ebook company went bankrupt. That's a long time ago. The Atlantic article, The Shame of College Sports, you can call it up on Google anytime.
Okay.
Which has 90% of it. The Atlantic Monthly started this, and it was so long ago that there was an ebook experiment.
Well, actually, if I was the Atlantic, I would be trying to figure out how to republish that sucker, y'all, because it was called The Cartel: Inside the Rise and Imminent Fall of the NCAA. And folks, if you read that book, if you read what Taylor laid out, y'all heard me reference student athlete. Even that phrase, that was not a phrase that was conjured up in the best interest of students. Taylor, explain to people even where the phrase student athlete came from.
It was contrived, admittedly, by the head of the NCAA, by their lawyers, to make it sound like an athlete in college who was a hybrid between a student and an athlete, and then nobody could understand it but the NCAA, and so that if players were hurt and got brain damaged, they couldn't collect unemployment or workers' compensation because they were defined as student athletes, which weren't quite employees. So it was originally concocted to confuse people. And we don't hyphenate anybody else in college. We don't call them student cashiers, or most students have some sort of job. But the student athlete is the only one that they concocted that thing in order to help keep the schools from having any liability for injuries to the players.
So it was a legal strategy to come up with that name, student athlete, that phrase.
A legal strategy, but once it worked, anybody from college sports, including broadcasters, uses it like a mantra. They always talk about student athletes, but we don't talk about any other student that way. They're students in the classroom, and they're athletes or whatever else they want to do outside the classroom. But this was a way for the universities to reap the benefits of the athletic talent without any responsibility or obligation to those same athletes. And it's been going on for a long time. As you say, the court's decision today only applies to academically related benefits, which athletes can start getting. But it's a huge precedent, and the court, including surprisingly Justice Kavanaugh, almost invited athletes to file more suits going to the basic issues of compensation. Once these college athletes get some rights, it's hard to keep the rest of them from them.
And in fact, to the point that you just made, I think I want to show this, folks. Let me zoom in if I can. This is literally what Justice Kavanaugh wrote. Quote, "The bottom line is that the NCAA and its member colleges are suppressing the pay of student athletes who collectively generate billions of dollars in revenues for colleges every year. Those enormous sums of money flow to seemingly everyone except the student athletes. College presidents, athletic directors, coaches, conference commissioners, and NCAA executives take in 6- and 7-figure salaries. Colleges build lavish new facilities, but the student athletes who generate the revenues, many of whom are African American and from lower income backgrounds, end up with little or nothing. See brief for African American antitrust lawyers."
Absolutely. It sounds to me like he read what we wrote. A bunch of historians, I was pleased and privileged to be on an amicus brief of historians saying this injustice has a long history in the United States. It took a long time to build up all the layers so that a lot of people in the public were kind of brainwashed into thinking this was okay. But this begins to move toward justice after a long time, and I can't be happier that the court issued this decision today. I hope others follow from it.
And the thing that, again, we've talked about a lot, like this has been building, the Ed O'Bannon lawsuit, when they went after the video game makers for using the likenesses of athletes. The NCAA claimed that their names weren't on it, so therefore that wasn't them. But you're going, yeah, but you're using the number, you're using the physical build, all of that. We know exactly what's going on here. And Oscar Robertson complained about that. Here's Oscar Robertson, who hadn't been in college in 40, 50 years, and they were using his likeness from the University of Cincinnati, and he was like, "What the hell? I ain't even been there for half a century." And that's what they were. They had been making all of this money, and they've been crying, "Oh, but if this happens, all the other sports, we're not going to be able to fund them." No, it is now turned to big money. Now you have the Power 5 conferences talking about expanding the playoffs from 4 to 12 teams. Why? More TV money.
Absolutely. By the way, I predicted that in the Shame of College Sports was written in 2011 before the playoffs started, and they were already angling toward the 4-team playoff, and inevitably it's going to grow because the revenue grows exponentially when you have a larger tournament. That's the lesson of March Madness in basketball, which basically finances the entire NCAA budget.
You know, and the thing that really jumps out at me with this, and you said it best, how they brainwash all of these people. And it has been, even when I hear black folks saying crazy stuff, Taylor, well, you know, they're getting a free education. And you're like, you clearly don't know a damn thing about college sports. I worked in the athletic department at Texas A&M for 2 years in their video lab. I saw, now, I mean, there was one brother who went to A&M on an architecture scholarship, and they were angry, telling him he needed to stop focusing on architecture and focus on football. And he said, "I'm not here for football." And now he was a player, but his whole deal was, look, I know what I'm here for, and that happens all the time, where essentially these are professional athletes. And the Olympics, track and field was the same way. All these so-called amateur sports. And then, of course, Prefontaine and others begin to sue them. And now you have athletes who are still amateur athletes, but they're not getting paid a lot of money, who run track and field and stuff like that. This whole system was designed for another group to make all the money and partaking in the free labor.
People will get away with it if they can. You mentioned the Olympics, and Steve Prefontaine. Actually, ironically, Congress ended amateurism in Olympic sports because the Soviet Union was clearly paying its athletes, and we were losing too many medals. So in the 70s, they basically said the athletes themselves have to be represented on each of the Olympic committees. And as soon as they did that, the Olympics changed. But it didn't affect the popularity of the Olympics at all. The fact that Michael Phelps can make millions of dollars in endorsements. He's still competing in the Olympics, and so are Olympic athletes. And that same sort of model will probably work sometime soon, I hope, for college athletes in regular college sports. Congress itself showed that it can be done. That's how they fixed the Olympics.
Well, and again, that was because they didn't like America losing.
No, they didn't like that. The Russians were doping and paying their athletes a lot and basically turning them into, that's all they did. So the Soviet Union was winning too many gold medals in the Olympics. And so we wanted to be able to compete with that. So because Steve Prefontaine was on food stamps. The rules were so strict that they couldn't get money to train with. And now, of course, they have sponsorships and they have first-class training facilities, and they can compete with athletes from Russia or any other country.
But what does it say about the American society, Taylor? Where, and this goes beyond the NCAA. It's just like all of these people who are brainwashed to build billion-dollar stadiums for owners to make them richer. And then they get mad when a player decides to hold out. How dare you hold out? You're hurting our team. And that owner got no problem jacking up concession prices, ticket prices, all of that. I mean, it is mind-boggling to me when I keep seeing this happen, and I go, you do know that when you taxpayers finance that new stadium, you're paying the bonds. So, the owner, I'll chip in $150 million for the $1 billion. Hell, if you could build me a $1 billion stadium, and I got to chip in just 10%. Sure, why not?
People will get away with whatever they can get away with, and if they can distract you with a shiny object and an exciting play on TV and take all the money, then if you're not careful, they can convince you to be blind to elementary fairness. And so this is not new, but the good thing about America is as long as there are courts and as long as people can fight and march and write and think, we'll be able to have a chance at least to correct some of these things. But this has gotten really, really bad when you've gotten a gigantic industry with coaches multiplying. You've got $1 million assistant coaches, $1 million a year assistant coaches proliferating because they got so much money. They slather it all over the athletic department and don't have to give the athletes any salary at all. But that will change as reform comes into this system. And
I think, frankly, Taylor, last point here, I think with this 9-0 decision, NCAA, get ready for an onslaught of lawsuits in other areas. You laid it out, the rise and imminent fall of the NCAA. Y'all, this is the article right here that was in the Atlantic, and all you do is just type in Taylor Branch, NCAA in the Atlantic, and it's called The Shame of College Sports. A leading civil rights historian makes the case for paying college athletes and reveals how a spate of lawsuits working their way through the courts could destroy the NCAA. Y'all, that was written that was in the October 2011 issue of the Atlantic. Here we are almost 10 years later, and it's coming to pass. They're going to go down real fast. They're going to have to pass a lot of new rules to avoid this whole thing crumbling.
Well, Roland, I agree, but be aware of one thing. That's a lot of money to hang on to, and they're going to hang on to it as long as they can. They'll come up with every scare tactic they can think of. They're going to say you're not going to have swimming and that it's going to hurt every other sport and so on and so forth. So they will cry wolf like crazy. but the fundamentals are on the side of the athletes who produce the talent. When you watch a sporting event on television, they don't point the cameras at the coaches or the conference officials who are collecting the money. They point it at the athletes, and it's only fair that they should have a share of the benefits that they earn.
Absolutely. All right then. Taylor Branch, we surely appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Roland.
Folks, back to our Roland Martin unfiltered video in just one moment.
Racial injustice is a scourge on this nation, and the Black community has felt it for generations. We have an obligation to do something about it. Whether it's canceling student debt, increasing the minimum wage, or investing in Black-owned businesses, the Black community deserves so much better. I'm Nina Turner, and I'm running for Congress to do something about it.